Good afternoon, everyone, and once again, I'd like to thank you back to our next installment of Education Works. Today, I'm here with one of Camden's finest, Mr. Chris Collins, founder, editor-in-chief, chief writer, chief marketer here at the Anointed News Journal. And so, Chris, I want to thank you, from the bottom of my heart for participating in this segment.
Well, Brian, first of all, thank you for interviewing myself for Education Works. We're honored to be part of what you're doing.
All right, thank you so much. And so, to begin right away, Chris, would you mind telling our audience a little bit about yourself and where you're from, what you've done, a little about Anointed News Journal, but most importantly, how education has helped to sort of shape who you are and create opportunities for you in your life.
Sure. Well, let me try my best to give you the short version. All right. Again, Chris Collins is my name. I'm a Camdenite, born and raised here in the city of Camden. Grew up in the Camden City School District, and I'm a graduate of the greatest class ever to leave Camden High School, and that's the class of 1986 for all you listeners out there or you viewers out there. Still living in the city of Camden. I'm in the Parkside community. I'm very proud to be a Camdenite. And I often say, if you cut me, I bleed purple and gold, but I'm not mad at the orange and black either. All right. I am the CEO, editor-in-chief of the Anointed News Journal, which is the nation's premier faith-based and professional news publication for winners. And what I mean by that, Brian, is that we build a brand, we build a product that shares the positives of Camden with the world. The Anointed News Journal has been fortunate in the past 24 years to not only be birthed out of the city of Camden, to be based in the city of Camden, but to share Camden with over 28 states across the country and 10 nations around the world. So today we're excited about Camden and the things that's going on in Camden. And we're excited about just being a part of Camden and the building process of Camden. In 1986, I was just a kid coming out of Camden High School. College wasn't in my game plan. I came from a very traditional, hard-working family. My mother was from Kentucky. My father was from Merchantville. He was a soldier, 101st Airborne. And once they married, they wind up landing in Camden, New Jersey. My work ethics come from my mother and father. My father was a retail manager at the old Gimbels and Woolworths in Philadelphia, and my mother was a seamstress at Cooper Hospital. Before Cooper Hospital, many people may remember my mother, Miss Chrissy. She was the lady at Chinese American restaurant that took your orders, which we know today as Lowe's Chop Suey on off of Broadway and Kane. So I wasn't part of a family that pushed education. I was part of a family that pushed hard work, take care of your family, that pushed military and things like that. However, I was fortunate because out of 7 siblings, I'm the youngest. And there's a 9-year gap between myself and my brothers and sisters who are all stair steps. So they were products of the 60s and 70s. For me, being a product of the 80s, when I graduated from Camden High School, there were all kind of options. You could go to college, you can go to military, you had startup businesses, entrepreneurship. So my ultimate career goal as a young man was to be a New Jersey State Trooper. I was interested in a career in law enforcement. I worked for the Camden County Sheriff Department at the age of 18 for Sheriff Bill Simon. And then at the age of 18, I was the youngest recruit in New Jersey State Police at that time. However, something happened in my life that never happened before, and it dealt with education. I scored a 69 on my criminal law exam, and I had to qualify with a 70. And as a result, New Jersey State Police, after 6 weeks, dismissed me. made me go through the process all over again. I went back in 113th state police class. I was previous in 110th. And after going through all the processing all over again and time to go to work, there was a hiring freeze that came on all state jobs that lasted for 3 years. In those 3 years, I went through, different changes in life. I was a young married kid at the age of 20. I was going through a divorce around that time in my life. And when it was all said and done, New Jersey State Police felt that Chris Collins had too much going on in his personal life to concentrate on a job as a New Jersey State Trooper. So trying to figure out what's next for me, I didn't know. I knew that I wasn't going into state police. For 3 years, New Jersey State Police controlled my life. I couldn't do anything except stay out of trouble. At that time, I couldn't go back to school because when they called me, I had to be ready to report. So they took away a lot of options. Once I realized that part wasn't going to happen, then I felt free. I felt free to go in any direction. Being young, being married, I believe I had my first 2 kids at that time. I began to look at some other things. I was helping a former co-worker of mine who was doing a newspaper in the city of Chester. We were salespeople. I've always had a gift in sales and marketing. So what we were selling at the time was education. We were enrolling men and women in secretarial school and tractor trailer school. So even as a business professional, as a sales rep, we would get paid maybe $110 for everybody we enrolled in the school. So running the streets of New Jersey, Philadelphia, Delaware at the age in my young 20s, just hustling, pushing numbers, just trying to close. I was a closer. The goal was to put people in school. Eventually, that company shut down, and I was helping my buddy over in Chester when he was doing his newspapers, just selling some advertisement. I could care less about writing. English wasn't my favorite subject. The newspaper wasn't my thing. But I learned the business. I took the time to study this young man, to watch what he was doing, and he taught me the business. Then a supernatural experience began to happen. It seemed as if I always had a camera. I would always go around with a camera. And it seemed like every time I would go into a sanctuary, preachers would stop preaching and start prophesying that God was doing a restoration with his people. And every time he's done this throughout history, he's always raised up a tabloid or a script or someone to write about it. And God called me for that purpose. Yeah, whatever. I'm not interested. I'm no writer. I'm no journalist. I'm a sales guy. I'm a marketer. And go to another church and the same thing. So eventually what happened in my life was that I was supposed to get employed with the Delaware River Port Authority Police. Politically, I thought I had some connections. My best friend at the time, her father was director of personnel for the Port Authority, the late Jay Thomas. And out of 25 recruits, 24 got hired. The only one that didn't get hired was Chris Collins. And when that happened, that's when I began to realize that even though my heart said law enforcement, God had a different plan for me. And so I began to look at this vision that was given to me for the Anointed News Journal. And I took the time to do some research. I wrote a business plan. The vision came from Habakkuk 2:2, from the Holy Scriptures, that says, write the vision, make it plain, and wait on it because it's for due time. But wait on it because it will surely come. So in 1994, we wrote the game plan for the Anointed News Journal. 1995, around April 1995, we put our first edition out, 20 pages, 2,000 copies. May, 20 pages, 5,000 copies. June, 24 pages, 20,000 copies. And we just progressed from that point on. We never looked back. We never received any startup money, any loans. I helped my 6th grade school teacher move, and he gave me $140. I took $29 and got me a P.O. box. I took about $60 and registered my trade name with the county clerk. And I took $50 and got me a 1-800 answering service because I couldn't afford to hire anybody. And then we were in business. And then it was just pure hustle, pure sweat equity, believing in yourself. And as a inner city kid who comes from a place that nobody feels anything good comes out of, I begin to tell myself I have to believe in me even when no one else believes in me. And so that's what I say to others. You got to believe in you when no one else do. As long as you believe in your vision and it's clear to you what that vision is, nothing can stop you. And at the end of the day, there's no amount of money that anybody could offer me that's worth giving up the dream. So fast forward till today, Brian, we spent 21 and a half years as a monthly newspaper. The goal was to do maybe 12 editions a year. We never hit 12. It was always 10 or 11 or 9 for the year. 2006 was a devastating year. I hit a wall. I just had no drive. And I think I might have printed 6 times that year. Well, in the last 2 years, in July of 2016, we transitioned to a weekly newspaper. I think we did about 27, 28 editions in 2016. And 2017, we put out 51 editions. And we're on pace this year to do 51 editions again. Even though there's 52 weeks out of the year, there's one particular week that we don't have the responsibility of running the legal notices, which gives us a week that we could take a break and restructure. So proud to say that today we have over 180,000 readers every week in physical print, and then on social media and then on the World Wide Web, we get correspondence from all over the world. And that's the story of the Anointed News Journal.
That's quite a journey, and thank you for sharing that with us. If you wouldn't mind, throughout your journeys as a businessman and into today, would you mind sharing with our viewers what are some of the most common skills that are in demand in your position, and how can we, as members of the Black and Brown community, seek to strengthen ourselves, especially our young children, to be able to position them for success based upon those needs and demands?
Well, Brian, thank you for asking that question. That's a very important question. Part of my journey, when I took a look at my community, there was somewhat a personal attitude that I had, and that attitude was simple. Why is it that we teach our kids in the inner city, grow up, get a job, dietary, housekeeping, laundry, don't be a police officer, be a security guard, don't be a RN, be a CNA? And I felt that we need to change the way we think in the urban community. And it's funny because one day I was sitting back and I was watching cartoons, and I was watching Tweety Bird and Sylvester, and there was a knock at the door, and when Sylvester opened up the door, there was a character in a 3-piece suit with a briefcase and a top hat, and Tweety Bird said, "Oh, he's an entrepreneur." It blew me away. And the reason why was because I was 20 years old before I even knew what an entrepreneur was. And that's when I was teaching, when I was selling education. We were losing our jobs. And my boss said, "Well, they're getting rid of me. You guys better start looking for work because they're probably going to get rid of you too." And I saw a newspaper ad that said entrepreneurs only. And I remember asking him, "Oscar, what's an entrepreneur?" And he told me at 20. But when I saw that cartoon, I said, wow, some little kid at 5 and 6 years old, they're learning about entrepreneurship, but in the hood, we learning our examples are dietary, housekeeping, laundry, security, CNA.
Services,
So
leadership.
I took it upon myself that I wanted to start teaching the skills that's necessary for what I do. So one particular summer I went into the BPUM. Most people in the city of Camden are familiar, Poppy Sharp and the BPUM, the centers throughout the city. And I would teach an 8-week course, newspaper course. And I would teach creative writing, the 5 W's in the H, who, what, where, when, why, and how. I would give all the kids a journal, and I would teach them how to write stories, creative writing. They would interview their parents, they would interview each other, their teachers, and these kids were from the age of 5 on up. And I would teach them photography. I would teach them the camera. I would take it apart, show them what a lens is, what the camera was, teach them at that time the difference in the speeds of film and a zoom lens. I would let the kids look through it. I would teach them art. Art is a big part of what we do. When we start with a newspaper, it's just a blank sheet. There's nothing on it. At that time when we first started, everything was cut and paste. So I had my glue sticks, I had my border tape, I had my X-Acto knife and my graphic ruler, and I would type up all the articles in Word. I would justify the columns so they would be squared off, cut them out with the scissors, and then I would take the glue stick and glue them and paste them on a big grid board and take the ruler and make sure all the lines were straight. Well, today we have the programs that we can just drop things in. So, and as crazy as it sounds, I probably could get done a layout much quicker back in the day than dealing with computers and things freezing up now. So some of the things that's involved in this and what we taught the kids back then was art. Those that were not talented writing may have been talented drawing. And so art's involved in what we do. Journalism, writing, photography is involved in what we do. Technology. So there's a lot of things. When you look at media, and there's different forms of media, whether it's print, radio, TV, billboard, social media, web media, and now we have the podcast and all the other things. But in the print media game, we're big on art. You have to be a visionary, because when I start with a blank board, I have to create something in my mind, and then I have to transfer it to what you see. Every cover, if you look at this wall, every cover, the goal is to create a cover page that's what I call sellable. How can I create a cover that's going to make someone pick that product up and say, I want to be a part of this? So those are some of the skills you have. You gotta be able to communicate. You gotta be able to talk. In any form of media, we survive off of advertising dollars. So you have to be able to market your product. You have to be able to talk to decision makers and close the deal so that you can generate the cash flow to be able to pay the printer, the printing press, so you can get your product on the street.
What are some recommendations as you look back that you can make to parents, right? That may have a child that's interested in entering into one of the many forms of media? What should they begin to do as a regular part of their interactions with their child to position that child for success in the field later on?
All right. Well, again, Brian, thanks for asking that question. I believe that the first thing that a parent should do is expose their children to opportunity. I was fortunate, again, being one of 7, and my father being a manager at Woolworths at the time. There were times when my father would take me to work with him. And when I would go work at Woolworths, I would see my father work in a retail facility. He would allow me to work in whatever department I wanted. So, of course, it was either the candy department, the snack bar, or the toy department, because I could play with the toys. I translate that as, in my business, Oftentimes we do various sponsorships, the big expos. We serve as media sponsors and things like that. So my children were always a part of what I've done. When we would do the Black Expo, my children would be there, and they were, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old at the time, and they would work the table with me. We would have our booths, and I remember my first year at the Black Expo, I was told that they were expecting 50,000 people. I ran 20,000 newspapers just for that event. I came home with 19,000 papers because no one was buying them. The next year at the expo, I showed up with my kids, and maybe they didn't buy from me, but they would buy from my kids. And my son was even selling my business cards. And I said, Rocky, you can't do that. But he gave me $1, Dad. Then I realized that, when you expose kids to opportunity and they get out there, a lot of the adult population will support the children. So that's key. Give them exposure. Also, as best as you can, I know financially it's tough for a lot of parents. You're talking to a parent that had 4 kids attending Penn State University at the same time. So financially, there was no extra money. But thank God that someone was able to coach me and introduce me to FAFSA and some other strategies of giving my kids the opportunity to go to college. And I think that that's absolutely necessary. When I graduated high school, it wasn't mandatory. You had to be 18 and a high school grad for most government jobs and most positions. Well, nowadays you got to have some type of degree. And the economy has been so crazy at times that you have people with bachelor's degrees that's stocking shelves at Walmart. You have people with degrees that's selling hot dogs. But again, you don't give up on the vision. You don't give up on the dream. Expose your kids. And then you have to be sensitive enough to your children that when they go to make a decision, yes, you must guide them. Okay, when it came time for my youngest son to go to college, I'll mention him because at the age of 5, he was classified as a genius by the Camden City School District. So there were things lined up for him, or things that he could do that my other 3 maybe could not do. When it came time for him to go to college, he thought he was going to pursue one avenue, but yet there was another avenue that he was accepted that most kids from our community do not get accepted. And he got accepted to Penn State Smill College of Business as a freshman when you have to be a junior to even apply to Smill. But yet he also got accepted to University of Maryland Honors College, which he thought he was going to pursue that way. But as a parent, I had to give my input and give that guidance that you can't pass up this opportunity. Today, he could not imagine going any other place but the Penn State route. Now, as a parent, here's a guy that walked away from a career in law enforcement to pursue my dream of starting a newspaper. When that same kid came out of college and was working in corporate America as a buyer for American Eagle, after he fulfilled his contract, he made a conscious decision to leave and go to LA. He saved up about 10 grand to pursue his career as an American actor. As parents, his mother hit the floor on that. How can you walk away? Myself, being in a situation where I left a profession to pursue my dream, I had to understand that it was time for this kid to pursue his dream as well. So what I say to parents is sometimes not only do you expose them to things, you try to support them as best as you can by, I always share with my kids that it was my responsibility as your father to provide you with opportunity. What you do with that opportunity is up to you, and you will be accountable for your decisions. So, so I, as moral support to his mother, I would ask him, well, Rocky, what do you feel you can do in LA that you can't do in New York, where he was living, which was much closer to home? His response was, the people in LA are so laid back that when you take a person from the East Coast with that East Coast hustle, they more aggressive, they can land the opportunity better. And his second day in LA, he was on TV. A week later, he became a television personality on P. Diddy's network, Revolt TV. So exposure is the key. Support is the key. And being sensitive to, as I say, not tripping when they go to make a life decision that's for their future. Okay? Most people want their kids to be a doctor or a lawyer, but we know a lot of unemployed doctors and unemployed lawyers, but your kid may decide that they want to do something that's non-traditional to your family.
So looking back over your childhood, what are some ways in which your parents have helped to prepare you for this moment? And what lessons have you sought to pass on to your children as they still resonate with you today?
Well, Brian, I like to say that I was fortunate coming from a two-parent home, a loving family. And the things that I remember from my parents is key is that they were hard workers. And the one thing that my father taught me is something called love. My father was a very physical man. He was not only was he a man of honor being in the 101st Airborne in the United States Army, but he was also a prize fighter in the boxing ring. So even though he was a very physical man, he was a very compassionate and loving man. And I remember just walking into the department stores with him, and my father would say something like, say, friend, can you tell me where I can find the paint? Or, hey, friend, can you tell me where I can find this or that? So he had a very loving heart for people. And my mother was a woman of service. She was a very strong woman, but she would do everything for everybody, from the Boy Scouts and the Cub Scouts to making candy apples on Halloween for the neighborhood kids growing up in the projects at Roosevelt Manor. We were fortunate to move to Parkside, where I still reside today. And my mother had the attitude, even as a seamstress, if a doctor's uniform got torn, she had to sew it back together. When I ran Little League football and baseball at Whitman Park, every Sunday after game day, she would take those uniforms and she would wash them and sew them back together if kids' jerseys got torn. And then for 7 years of my life serving with the United States Marine Corps Reserve Toys for Tot Foundation as the local community organizer. For 7 years, 50,000 toys ran through my mother's house every year, and we gave toys to every agency throughout the county, and we served over 400 families every year throughout Camden County and Camden City. So the key thing and the most important thing that I learned from my parents was service to all people, and that dedication, and to be a man of love. And those are things that I teach my children. I constantly remind them that when you make it, you make sure you come back home and you go down to that ball field and you help that coach, you give a donation, you give a book scholarship to some college kid coming out of your community. Never forget where you come from. They don't have to come home and fight in this city like their father fights, but they still must come back and do something positive for the city. So I teach that, and I teach them to be kind and to serve others. All right. For me, I believe as a community leader, in order for Chris Collins to be the greatest community leader, Chris Collins first must be the greatest community servant. And it's the service for others that will make you great in time.
We both agree that parent involvement is key in a child's education. Could you share some ways that you think parents can partner with schools to help ensure success for all students and a high quality experience for all within schools?
There are many ways that parents can partner with schools to help ensure the success of their students. First of all, before we get into the partnership, let's talk about the communications at home. I was a student from a very loving family. However, my father was a hard-working man. He never came to one school meeting. He never came to one football game. Never came to one stage performance for the winter concert or the spring concert. However, I understood that his role, he was a working man. And I just say that because oftentimes people make excuses that if parents are not involved, the kids are not as successful. My mother was the one who came to the PTA meetings back then. She was the one that came to the school concerts and all those things. The only time my mother showed up on a football field was to take me to the ER if I got hurt. So outside of that, but I believe that parents should be involved. When my kids were in school, it was my goal to be the number one parent that helped participate at school. I was part of the PTOs when my kids were at BPUM and early childhood education. Whenever there were trips going on, I was always a chaperone. I would always make contributions. If there were 5 tickets that didn't sell, I would buy those 5 tickets and give them away. So there's many ways. Schools today have parent centers. I was always part of the parent center. You know, I think that when a parent is involved in the school, you know, kids get a little bit more excitement, a little bit more motivation about school. I think that when parents talk to their kids about some of the struggles that their kids are going through. I remember in grade school, I struggled in math. I remember sitting at the kitchen table while my mother was cooking and I'm doing my math homework and I'm just having a fit. And my mother turned and looked at me and said, "Why are you having such a hard time in math?" I was good in math. I got skipped a grade because of math. And I said, "Mom, you were good in math?" Well, that changed my whole outlook on math. Mom was good in math. Math became my favorite subject. And from that moment on, I became great in math. Math was like a guarantee A for me. But because my mom shared her story with me. I think it's key for parents to show up at the school meetings, for parents to express their concerns to the schools, for parents to show. I was a parent that my kids never knew when I would show up at the school. It was always an open door policy with some of the teachers that parents could come in and look at the chart on the wall and see if your kids turned in assignments and things like that. I was that parent. You know, I would show up at Camden High School, I would show up at Hatch and just walk into my kids' classroom, look at the board and walk out. So that kept my kids on their toes, saying they never knew when their dad was going to show up. And, you know, that was always key for me. And I also think that doing workshops for parents, especially high school parents, oftentimes you have college fairs and career fairs, but you forget about the parents, right? Most parents don't know what FAFSA is because they never experienced their kid going to college. So parents are putting their homes up on a second mortgage to try and send their kid to college. Kids are going off to college and getting sent back home because parents can't afford to pay the bill. Kids are trying to pursue schools with big price tags when they can go to local schools for little as nothing, if not free. So exposing parents and kids to the various options. A Parent Plus loan. When I was first told by Penn State I needed to apply for a Parent Plus loan, my response was, well, there's no need for me to apply because my credit's jacked up. They're not going to give me a loan. And then the bursar said, well, no, Mr. Collins, don't work like that. If a parent applies and get denied, the federal government says, well, at least this parent tried. And they give that kid an extra $4,000, $2 per semester. So if parents get involved in the schools, in the educational institutions, and there's communication going between the educators and the parents and then the children, I think it makes better outcomes for the success of that child.
As we wrap up, what challenges do you see here in the city of Camden when it comes to education, and how can parents organize to affect positive changes you see needed to help prepare more of our students for business success or academic success?
That's a tough question there. And let me just say, first of all, with the many challenges that go on in the city of Camden, I would conclude that there's just as many opportunities as there are challenges, if not more. I believe that coming from a place like Camden, which I believe Camden represents every urban community across the country, if not around the world, there come a time that as an individual, you have to claim ownership of where you're from. I remember in year 13 of running the Anointed News Journal, I asked one of the directors for the city of Camden, I said to him, I said, I've been doing this newspaper for 13 years. What do I have to do business with my own city? And he looked at me and he said to me, well, if the city wanted to do business with you, they would have done it by now. And I said, wow, that made good sense to me. For a moment, and that moment lasted about 2 years, I became very bitter with the city that I love. And I felt that the city didn't deserve me. You know, if I was to get shot in the head, I would not die in this city. I would get in my car, drive to Collinswood, Pennsauken, or Philly and drop dead, but I wasn't going to drop dead here. That was my attitude. Eventually, I got over that, and I said to myself, Camden don't owe me nothing. I'm going to build a brand. I'm going to make it the best brand, and I'm going to make the city come to me. And, you know, I just took that attitude. So throughout the years as a leader, you have to claim ownership. It's like you're speaking it into existence. When I look at Camden today and I look at the $3 billion worth of new development going on, that's for me. That's not for any other news network to come into my city and take claim of that, right? I'll be whatever. I can't say the word if I'm going to let the Courier Post, the Philadelphia Inquirer, or any other network come into my hometown and claim all this stuff when we're born and raised in this city. So when you take ownership and you build relationships, I learned as a young man, success comes from building good relationships. When you build good relationships, all right, it's just like going back to the Holy Scriptures when David in the 23rd Psalm, he said, thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. If I'm a glass of water and I fill it up and it runs over, everything around that glass is going to get wet. So if you're successful, everybody that's in your circle is going to rub off some of that success. So when you surround yourself with like-minded people and successful people, success becomes your destiny. By the same token, if you surround yourself with the wrong people, then that can become your destiny as well. So throughout time in this city of Camden, with my leadership, giving young people in the Camden City School District and the other schools, the various assortment of schools we have here, the opportunity to write editorials in the newspapers, for me to highlight the good of Camden. The beauty of the Anointed News Journal is when you pick one up, you might just see yourself or someone you know doing some positive things in the city of Camden. So being a real example, being someone who was just a graduate of Camden High School. I didn't do college until I was 41 years old. When I got tired of paying tuition for my kids, I decided to pay for myself. And today I hold a master's degree, but it didn't come till later in my life. But I learned to not talk as much, but to listen and watch and learn. Instead of watching Housewives of Atlanta, maybe you might want to watch CNN or Discovery Channel. So you begin to learn. So I'm fortunate because as a newspaper owner, I can do what I want. As a marketer, there's nobody that can give you a better advertising deal than Chris Collins and the Anointed News Journal, because you might pay me for 1 month and I may run it multiple, because it's about the relationship. Giving a young person an opportunity to write, giving a professional an opportunity to share editorials about their career, being in partnership with the school district and educators, giving them an opportunity to have columns in the paper. You know, this is really a powerful thing that we have. It's really way bigger than Chris Collins. The brand, the Anointed brand, is a global brand, much bigger than whatever my mind can perceive. Again, we get correspondents from all around the world, in every state in this country, places I've never gone to that I probably will never get to: Malawi, South Africa, Bloemfontein, Free State, South Africa, Texas, all kind of places. Even though I have not physically been there, our work has been there, and we've shared Camden with the world. And we help when others have a lot of negative things to say about the city. In 24 years, we still have not run out of great things to write about the great people of the city of Camden. And we hold back great stories every week. From the mayors to the Congress to the governors, giving them an opportunity to express themselves, all the positive things, without the rhetoric of the daily press being on their back. Yeah. So it's really a powerful thing for us here in the city of Camden, for us to be able to carry out the vision that God gave us 24, 25 years ago. It's just a powerful thing, and I'm honored that God chose me. I didn't see it in the beginning, but he chose me, and that's something that's very powerful.
Chris, I think that's a great way to close out this segment, that there are no such things as challenges. There's only opportunities, and it begins with taking ownership for the part or the role that you can play in creating that opportunity. I hope that this has been truly as informative for you and uplifting for you as it has been for me. Once again, my name is Brian Morton, Executive Director, Parents for Great Camden Schools. This is my good friend, Chris Collins, and if you haven't picked up a copy of the Anointed News Journal, you have been denying yourself, access to some really great stories on leaders and other, doers here in the city of Camden and in the metropolitan community. Make sure that you support the Anointed News Journal. Make sure that you get to know Chris Collins and that you follow them on social media. I want to thank you again, and I want to say that you are definitely a positive example that education works, not only for us, but it can work for everyone. So thank you, Chris, and I wish you all this continued success in the world.
All right. And Brian, I just want to thank you once again for giving us the opportunity to be interviewed in this segment, and thank the many entrepreneurs and people that you have interviewed. I know there's some dynamic people coming out of this city. I certainly believe that for Camden, New Jersey to be such a small city, I believe that statistically we have more success stories that come out of Camden than any other place around the world. And for your viewers, let me just say again, you have to believe in you when no one else do. Don't be afraid. Just understand that all things will remain the same until the pain of remaining the same becomes greater than the pain of change. God bless you all, and thank you.